Okay, everyone, welcome. This is our second Kimmons Wilson School Research Forum of the fall 2021 semester. And this time we have Lisa DiNoto Glassner joining us. And the reason she's joining us is we're going to talk about her track and her career as an entrepreneur. And she has a very interesting path that she took to get to where she is today. And so I want to get into that with her and talk about the different maybe struggles and triumphs and challenges associated with being an entrepreneur, and kind of ask her guidance for anybody who might be looking into going down this path. So without further ado, well, I'll introduce Lisa. Lisa is the editor and the owner of The Castle Run. And she also is the owner operator of Core Memory Candles. And so Lisa, welcome to the forum. Thank you for talking with us. And if you could kind of briefly take us through your history as to, and your path of where you started and then to where you are today.
So first of all, thank you for having me, Cody. It's always fun when we get to talk. Yeah, gosh, that's a really big question. But I'll start and you can kind of guide me as you'd like with questions. But yeah, I think if you've heard me talk before, my background is no secret, but I know a lot of you are new to this story. So I'll just start from the beginning. I was incredibly academic growing up through grade school. I did my undergrad at Columbia University, and then got a law degree from Harvard. Back in 2004, I graduated from Harvard. And from there, and kind of all the way, right? I was kind of like on this wave of like, I was very good academically, obviously. And, I was kind of like writing that skill set and seeing what the next challenge was, what was the next hardest thing to do. And I think in that process, a lot of us kind of lose touch with what we like to do and what we love. So that was definitely happening to me even from the beginning. And then after Harvard, I went on to work in big law for a really long time, for almost 14 years. I was on Wall Street, and then I was outside of DC in the big law space doing mergers and acquisitions, really big deals, like, $100 billion deals. It, you kind of get sucked into this culture of misery, and I talk about that a lot. But again, if you're new to me, then you probably haven't heard me talk about it before. But you do sort of get sucked into this culture of misery, and you kind of develop this loyalty to the people that you're working with who are also unhappy, and you feel like you have this special skill set that is unique in the world, and that you kind of have a duty to use it. And so life continues to happen, and I got married and I had babies and we bought a house, not in that order. At one point along the way, my dad actually got sick. He was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and it was 10 months of just sheer hell when he got sick. And all of the tools that I had learned to kind of keep me healthy and keep me functioning kind of stopped working. And I've talked about this before, right, Cody? So I was into, eating well. I would do like rounds of Whole30 during high intensity deals to keep myself alert, sleeping patterns and meditating and working out and drinking your water and all the things that you're kind of supposed to, all the boxes that you're supposed to tick to make sure that you're a healthy, functioning individual who's clear-minded, all those good things. That I did all those things because you're working in a really intense atmosphere, and you just kind of have to use the tools that you have. And I was trying to choose healthy ones. But when my dad got sick, all those tools kind of stopped working. His illness was, cancer is always a bad thing. But leukemia in a 60-something-year-old man is a very traumatic thing. I was living a nightmare during that time. And like I said, all of my tools kind of weren't working for me. I couldn't meditate. I couldn't sit with that feeling. And so I started running, started distance running. And it kind of became my meditation. I talk about this a lot. It became my meditation, and I would go for these long runs, and it would clear my mind. And I kind of was able to kind of sit with my feelings, but also kind of get the ick out at the same time. So I was never a runner. I would kind of warm up on a treadmill maybe before a workout, but I was never a runner. But all of a sudden, distance running became this tool. And sadly, we lost my dad back in 2014, and I just kept running. And through this running, I began to. I'm sorry, this is a very long answer to your question, Cody, but
No, no worries.
it's
No.
meaningful. Um, through this running, other parts of my life that weren't right started to come into the fore. Um, this job situation, of course, being one of them. And I think the great thing about running is that or any meditative activity, whether it's cross stitch or that you like to sew, you like to sew, you like to paint, you like to take walks, you like to run, whatever works for you, any kind of meditative activity like that, that kind of frees up your mind because your body is occupied, or however it works for you. Kind of gets you into that headspace where you start to feel like you can tiptoe into the things that felt dangerous before.
Mhm.
And I think for me, getting back to your original question, Cody, obviously I was a very high intensity job that looked great on my resume, but made me miserable. I was really good at it, but I was kind of losing the desire to keep up with the latest. I mean, I was doing it, but I wasn't like eagerly keeping up with the latest, precedent and things like that.
Mhm.
Which is it's a very good sign that you're not long for your niche,
Mhm.
if you're no longer motivated to keep up with what's state of the art. Um, and through all of this, I think my husband, God bless him, used to say to me when I was in the thick of all of this, what's your daydream? Like, what do you want to do when we can get you out of this job that makes you so unhappy? What would you like to do? And my answer to him started to be, I just need time. I need like 6 months
Mhm.
to step back from this and clear my head and regroup and rediscover what I love, because I lost it a long, long time ago. And so um, I did end up leaving the law job. That's a whole long story in and of itself, but I did end up walking away from it, and started that process. It took a lot of work. That's maybe a story for another day, but we did end up getting me out of there. And I did walk away from the law job. And like I said, like, I don't discount how hard it is to start this process, because there was a time when even taking the blinders down to consider other possibilities felt too dangerous.
Mhm.
And I credit running with getting me out of that mindset and starting to be able to explore the possibilities. And it's just been this, and obviously that's the subject of this conversation, but it's been this sort of winding path ever since I walked away from that
Mhm.
job, to kind of reconnect with who I am and what I can provide to the community that I've formed, that we can talk about, and how I can best serve them in a way that supports me and my family. And so that's how this journey started. I don't discount the difficulty of it to anyone, because it was very, very hard for us to walk away from where I was. But yeah, that's kind of the one part of the backstory of all of this.
Yeah, and I think, and thank you for sharing that. And every time I hear it, it's hard to hear. I know it's hard to tell. So I'm sorry, and thank you for sharing that again. The One of the things that I think really comes out of it for me is, how do you how did you find the courage, if you will, to sort of decide, I'm going to follow a different path. I'm not going to follow the path that's expected of me, because I think a lot of people, as you said, a lot of people fall into that, and this is the expectations for individuals, and so this is the path that they're going to stay on, and it takes a lot of courage to be able to walk away from that, and as you said, or get back to something that you really, really enjoy. So can you walk us through how you found that courage, or if there was something that kind of spurred you along?
Yeah, so I think for a really long time I was kind of dealing with being so unhappy in the job that I was in by like fulfilling myself in other ways, or the little tools that I talked about,
Mhm.
like those little Whole 30s or the long runs, like the different things that you can kind of find satisfaction in while you're dealing with an otherwise difficult environment. Um, and one of my big tools was running. after we lost my dad and I was still in this job, I was doing these long runs still to kind of clear my head and get myself into a good mental space. And at one point, this is a very story that's very personal to me, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it in different ways. Um, at one point, I found out that there was a half marathon in Walt Disney World called the Princess Half, that just happened to be on February 21st, 2016, which is the day after my birthday. It was also the 2-year anniversary of the death of my father. And so I was like, I'm in, sign me up. Like, this is going to be my like sign to the universe that I'm still kicking. Like, it was this big symbolic thing. I mean, I'm a major distance runner now. So a half marathon, I could go out and run it right now. But at the time it was a very big thing for me. I had never done a distance like that formally. And so, I was doing these awful deals. I was like hunkered down. I remember like a birthday of my son's 3rd birthday. I spent like hiding out in a hotel room, like with my computer and printer, closing a deal while my husband and children were like off trying to celebrate his birthday because I couldn't get away. Billing atrocious hours. And I signed up for this race. And so through all of this, in the thick of it, I'm like training for this half marathon, and it's this like big symbolic thing. And I think it was the symbolism of what I was doing, I think, was getting me through a lot of what was happening day to day. And so, February 2016 comes around and we fly down to Disney World and I run my half marathon, and it's super meaningful, and I cry and I get my medal, and it's all the things that I hoped it was going to be. And then I came home and I crashed. And I think that happens to a lot of us. I said leading in, like, this is a very personal to me story, but I think a lot of us have been through it. It's like that moment where you achieve something that you've been fighting for so long, and it's everything you expected it to be in that moment, maybe. But afterwards, it's like, all right, well, now what? Like, now what's my thing? And I crashed really hard, and I got home from that trip, and I remember being on the telephone with one of my best friends from law school, who's amazing. She's an amazing woman. I was talking to her, and I'm just like, we're getting me out. We're getting me out. We had kind of been doing some stuff with my husband's business to kind of try and make things work and plan and figure out what we could do. I said, we're getting me out. Like, we're getting me out. I can't do it anymore. Her name's Teresa. And she said, Lisa, that's great. But like, you need to like put a date on your calendar. You need to put a date on your calendar. And I don't care if that date is 4 days from now or 4 years from now or 6 months from now, whatever it is, you need to put the date on the calendar and spend the period of time between now and then coming to terms with the fact that you're doing this, not just preparing financially, but coming to terms with the fact that you're doing this. Because while law had become a not positive part of my life, to say the least, it was a huge part of my identity, that I was this great lawyer. And so I did. I ended up putting a date on the calendar. It was about 6 months after that conversation. And I did spend that time both preparing financially and emotionally and psychologically for what was coming, and kind of coming to terms with like who I was without this thing. And also coming to terms, I think, with the fact that like I'm still using all those skills, but in a different way. And I think that's a huge thing. A lot of times I hear people talking about moving on or getting away from something that they hate. And it's taken me a long time to realize that too, I think, is that, nothing that you've experienced, even if you're walking away from it in a formal setting, you're always taking that skill set forward. The fact that I have a Harvard Law education, I use that every day of my life, whether I am, closing a deal or in a courtroom, which I never was. I was a corporate attorney, or, or selling candles, or doing this call with you, or, doing workout in the parks, or, communicating on Instagram. Like, everything that I do pulls from the body of knowledge that I have acquired over time. And whether I'm doing it by the books, by sitting in, at a conference table, negotiating a deal, using my Harvard Law degree, or, pouring candles while I listen to TED Talks in the morning, which is a lot of times how I spend my mornings now. I'm still in here. Yeah. What I'm doing is separate from it. I'm still in here, and I'm still using this whole body of knowledge that I've acquired. So short story long story short, I don't know which one that is, but I guess first I'll just recognize the fact that like the question that you're asking is something that we all deal with. And it was something that was one of the hardest things about all of this for me. But, you know, at the same time, I think we need to recognize that like we're still this person at the core of all of it. And like the activities that we choose to do, we
Yeah.
can come and go. And if it's not satisfying you, it doesn't matter what everybody around you thinks about how great what you're doing is. I mean, I had a very impressive resume, but I was miserable.
Hmm.
You know, and something like losing your dad in the way that I lost my dad is a really quick wake up call about how short life is, you
Yeah.
know? So.
Well, and I really appreciate that answer because it's a great look at how a person's mindset can change in sometimes little ways, and you have to plan out those steps, and sometimes kind of grand ways that sort of stop a person on a dime, and they change their perspective immediately. I think the as you're talking, I keep jotting down different questions and different notes and everything, to get to kind of, I guess, the main portion. I'll sort of bypass some of those. Where you are today, you now you live close to Walt Disney World, and you are, as I said earlier, you run a website that's focused on serving your community in various ways. You research, develop, design candles that are sold to we'll talk about that in a little bit, to resemble the parks. So how did you, once you decided to leave, and once you decided you get to the Orlando area, where did the idea for the Castle Run come from? I know you've talked about how important running was and is to you, but how did that actually kind of develop into, here's this plan, here's what I'm going to do, here's going to be the next phase of my life? How did you start that process?
Well, for starters, if there's a plan, I did not get a copy. Like, I would like to put in a request for a copy of the plan, because that would be amazing. But no, I'm kidding, of course, but only halfway. So you know, like I said, I wanted this to be an organic process. I wanted to feel like I was fulfilling what I could do with my life and what I could do for the world around me. And I wanted that to be an organic process that wasn't, because I had lived a whole life. I mean, I'm going to be overly dramatic. I was very blessed and I enjoyed a lot of things, to say the very least. But I think I had lived a lot of life setting my next step
Mm-hmm.
based on what was the next hardest thing. It was no longer an internal, like, what do I want to do with my time? Like, what calls to me? I had completely lost touch with that. And it was, you know, it was very much an externally driven process. And so I think, like I talked about, sort of detoxing and coming back in touch with what I loved. I think that was my primary focus, and coming out of what I was coming out of in law, which was a fairly traumatic work situation, to say the least. You know, I think, you know, my first duty was to myself. I knew that I wanted to share this journey because my audience was me, like before I left, like that my people, and the people that I think I can talk to most earnestly are the people who are the me from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago. And so I knew that it was something that I needed, and I knew that it was something a lot of other people that I'd shared my life with needed. And so I knew I wanted to be open in this process. My first duty was to myself, because I didn't want to start processing. I didn't want to start sharing things that I was like sound biting. Like I wanted to like have the internal process first and then move into the next stage. So I kind of took a little bit of time just to kind of clear my head and process and keep running and kind of reconnecting with what called me. And then I slowly started tiptoeing into sharing my story. And that's where the blog came from. So the Castle Run, which is the name of my blog, at the time that I picked the name, it was just like, oh, it's kind of Run Disney. It's like a play on, Cinderella Castle. It simplifies a journey in a lot of ways. It's kind of a fun play on the Castle Run. So when I picked the name initially, I was just picking a name for a blog, whatever. And I just kind of very slowly tiptoed. I think my first article was just like, hi, I'm just writing a post because this is the hard part. And then
Mhm.
the second one will be easier. So I just started kind of openly sharing this journey and gathering this beautiful community around me. And that was kind of the first step in trying to just be open in this process.
Mhm.
And that's the Castle Run, that's the blog. And it's been this journey of walking away from this sort of socially dictated, perfect resume life to something that I'm rewriting myself with my family and how hard that is, and finding the courage to, that's a whole story, but the move down to Florida was not a decision that was easily made for a lot of reasons. So through the blog, I've just sort of walked my way through very openly
Mhm.
my journey. And sometimes I'm talking about the restaurant at Disney that we ate at, because a lot of my readers are just Disney fans. And sometimes I'm talking about sort of life lessons that I've learned along the way, because a lot of my readers don't care about Disney and just sort of
Mhm.
love this journey. And some people love to read both, but that's how the blog came to be. And of course, that has grown into Instagram because I love photography and video, and I've been able to kind of connect with people in a very intimate way there. So that's sort of become its own sort of work stream. And then as things were sort of coming to fore, or taking shape, I always have loved creating tangible things. I think
Mhm.
I'm such an academic that I've loved, like in law school, I used to crochet all the time just because I needed to, like, a thing I could hold that I made. So
Mhm.
I always have known that I like making something tangible, and I've always wanted a tangible product. And I think the hard thing for a lot of us is choosing which of the 10,000 ideas that you have
Yeah.
to run with. And for me, over the years, I've just kind of learned that, like, you just, like, pick one.
Mhm.
Just pick one. It doesn't matter which one it is, because if you get tired of it, you're not marrying it, right? Like, I'm not a candle maker until I'm 96. I'm a candle maker right now, and I might be a candle maker when I'm 96, but I don't have to be.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a silly story. I was in a craft store and I was chatting with a gentleman, and I found out that he had a Disney candle company, and I was like giving him some ideas that I had, and he walked away. And my immediate reaction as soon as he walked away was, I shouldn't have told him my ideas. I had never made a candle in my life, but all of a sudden I was like super possessive of these like candle ideas that I have, because I'm very into smells, and like
Mhm.
when before we moved to Disney, bringing the sense of Disney into our home was a really cool thing that we could do to feel close to the parks. But a lot of what I was finding didn't mesh with my aesthetic, so it was a place in the market that there was obviously a gap that
Yeah.
that I needed filled. So this gentleman walks away, and I kind of like, it's like, why do I care so much about these ideas that I gave this guy? I've never made a candle in my life. Well, all of a sudden I'm like buying wax, and I'm mixing, and I'm making, and all of a sudden I'm coming up with this product, and I'm realizing that through candles, like, I was a Wall Street attorney and I now have a candle shop. This is ridiculous. But like through the candles, like if you've been on my website, like it's very heavy on the product photography and,
Mhm.
Disney related photography, which is what the candles are inspired by. All of the labels on the candles are my design. So there's like a graphic design component to it. Just the sort of like chemical process of creating these gorgeous candles, because they are beautiful, is a process in and of itself. The sort of neurology behind the power of scent
Mhm.
is a thing in and of itself. I write a ton on the website about the scents and where they come from, so I'm able to channel that. And like most importantly, like, it's this awesome way to connect with my community, because all of a sudden, like, I'm giving them this thing that they needed, and it blew up. It really, it has done well. It's a cyclical business, of course, but it's done well from the outset, because I had the community going in that trusted me. And so they were excited when I offered them up. So I was lucky in that way, in the order of things that I launched, that I did the website and my Instagram and things, and then came into the candles after. So I sort of came in with a community that I wanted to serve.
Yeah.
And they were excited too. So I was lucky for that. But the um the quarantine situation that was going on last year was this enormous way for me to help my community, because so many people were canceling trips and missing the
Mhm.
parks and just needing that comfort in their daily life, because there were so many uncertainties and so many difficult things going on, that a lot of my product lines and stuff came out of things that people were asking for, especially during quarantine. And it's a circuitous path, right? Like it's, I started the blog because I am a writer at heart. Like that's my main thing. And so I wanted to write. And I've sort of tiptoed into photography and found out that I liked Instagram. And so I've become very, very active there. And one day I had a funny interaction with a gentleman at a craft store and realized that I wanted to try my hand at making a candle. And all of a sudden I have this crazy business.
Mhm.
So I guess there's no plan. That's the point, right? Like I want to write this book and that's on my to-do list. I want to get into photography more in this way. And that's on my to-do list. I want to create this, there's all these different plans that you have. And a lot of times we're incapacitated by the number of options that we have and the
Yeah.
number of ideas that we have.
Yeah.
And I think just like digging your teeth into one day and kind of seeing where it takes you and knowing that you're not stuck with it
Yeah.
if you don't love it anymore is the path.
Yeah.
Just kind of like trying to be open-minded, trying to say yes to opportunities and, follow your gut when it tells you to do things like make a candle.
Well, and if one thing that I would like for people to hear and know is from the time that you left and moved to the Orlando area, how long did it take you to start the blog and then kind of get the blog rolling and getting more and more readership? And then to how long did it take for you to start making candles? And then I have several questions kind of on the minutia of that we'll get into in just a little bit as well.
Yeah, totally. So I'll start just by saying like, it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
I work at least as hard, if not more right now than I ever did in law. And a part of that is because it's my baby. And so it means that much more. A part of it is because I just am who I am. And I've realized that. Like I remember saying when I first left my job, they were like, oh, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to lay on my couch and I'm going to read a book because I don't remember the last time I've done that. It's been 5 years now. I have yet to lie on my couch and read that book. I've
Mhm.
listened to a lot of audiobooks because I can do that while I'm working. But it's like you have to understand to a certain extent, like you are who you are.
Mhm.
And you're going to be a workaholic if you're a workaholic. But getting back to your question, so like I said, it was back in 2014 that I lost my father. So that's kind of a lot of the hallmark of this journey and all of the wheels turning that we've been talking about. I walked away from my job finally in 2017, and we moved down here. I started the blog not long after. We hadn't moved down here yet when I started the blog. But like I said, I mean, I was just like a girl with a blog. It wasn't like this big thing. I tiptoed in and I wrote an article and some of my family members and friends read it and they said, good job. It's that first blog post isn't going to go viral.
Yeah.
That first Instagram post isn't going to go viral. So it's been many years. I launched the candle brand. So the blog has been going on since around 2016.
Okay.
We moved down here in 2017. I started the candle line about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that's been around the clock journey. So lots and lots of work, lots and lots of time. None of it has been easy to say the very least. And it's a lot harder in a lot of ways than law, where I could just sort of say, well, I'm sad, but it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Right. Like now, if I put my head on my pillow at the end of the day and I feel like I haven't been productive or I'm not fulfilled, it's on me. And that's a pretty scary thing to tiptoe into. But I kind of think if you're not in charge of that, then something's wrong.
Yeah. And, I think when something that's really interesting about your story and other entrepreneurs that I hear about is there is this kind of this winding path of you choose one thing and you choose to focus on that, and but there are curves in the path along the way, and it's not something that happens overnight. So the next thing I want to talk about is how you built your brand, how you built your brand, the Lisa brand yourself, and then how that kind of developed into or has impacted and helped everything that you're doing, all of your entrepreneurial ventures that you're doing that. And so in a way, I'm guessing I'm also asking how you built your community when you first started down this path and continue to grow it to this day.
So, people throw that word authenticity around and it's super popular today, but there's something to it. I think, people want to connect, people want to feel seen, people want to share life
Mhm.
experiences. And so, like I said, when I started the blog, and sometimes I'm better about this than others because I'm a human being, but you try really hard to be open and honest about what you're going through and
Mhm.
why it's hard and why it's easy and why today was fun, but why yesterday was hard. Um, and I think that kind of going into that, whether you're taking a picture that, might show you in a more real light than you're comfortable with, or sharing a part of your day that might have been difficult, or, openly sharing your triumphs with, the online community that you're a part of. I think just like trying to just really be you and put yourself out there and allow yourself to connect with people in that way, like your community will find you. As long as you're putting yourself out
Yeah.
there and being, if this is what you want to do, if there's, an Instagram or a TikTok or a Facebook, or just going down the street to the community center and talking to people face to face, like just being a real person and kind of allowing your community to slowly grow around you. And then the other end of that, of course, is to like interact in the community.
Mhm.
A lot of people are angry because they don't have a certain Instagram following or a certain blog readership, or, but it's like, you're not giving back at all. We're all in this space together. And so, you know, interact with people in this space, give back to them, like talk to them about their lives so that when you
Mhm.
share your life, they're going to be inclined to pay attention too. And so, you know, that's the community building aspect of it. And then for me, the brand building aspect of it is sort of hand in hand because I am my brand.
Mhm.
Like I always say, like, if you like me, you're probably going to love my blog. And if you don't like me, you're probably going to hate my blog because it's just me. It's my voice. It's how I
Mhm.
talk. It's how I am. It's a very sort of way of looking at the world. It's just me. I'm not trying to report Disney news. I'm not trying to like objectively, report menus to you. I just
Mhm.
talk. And I happen to be at Disney World, so that's what I'm talking about, but it's just me. And so I think, building my brand has been something I've kind of tiptoed back into as I've rediscovered myself. Um, and sharing that kind of is the brand.
Mhm.
I get messages from people all the time wanting to write for the blog, and that's a lovely offer, but I always write back and I'm just like, it's just me.
Yeah.
There are so many blogs that would work for, and definitely keep looking for that opportunity. But like, just know like I can't because my blog is me. I'm not
Mhm.
like, it's just my voice. It's me. Like if somebody's reading my blog, it's because we're kind of friends in that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think brand for me and so many people now, I mean, that's just what the world is today
Mhm.
because of the way social media is, because of what appeals to people on social media, because of how we like are able to connect with people. I think like I'd be hard pressed to think of an entrepreneur that I know personally that, who they are isn't their brand.
Yeah.
Just because of that's how we connect these days. That's
Yeah.
how this works.
Well, and what advice would you give? Because we talk about brand and we talk about personal brand a lot, and how your brand is going to go a long way in determining what you do and how you, more importantly, how you do what you do. Um, you also today have we live in a society where we are so inundated with social media that a lot of times people are, they are portraying their brand the way they think maybe other people want to see it, or maybe the way they would like their brand to be. But you talk a lot about authenticity. What is kind of how are you able to be authentic, and what would your advice be to someone for being authentic when the nature of our society right now is we want to put out this image, and it's not always the authentic image. It is sometimes a very calculated image to the rest of the world. However, from what you're saying, at least in your experience, the best way to build a community is to be authentic with them, which is coincidentally also something else that we talk about. So what would be your advice to someone on how to be authentic in kind of the society that we live?
Um, I mean, I think as far as comfort level goes, that is difficult. Like we're used to sharing only our best selves. I always
Mhm,
say, I always laugh when people are like, we only post we're being so fake online. We only post our best moments and our best. Well, when did you take a picture before social media? You took it when you were happy.
mhm,
That's what we're sharing, right? Like I took a picture at a birthday party, not at a deathbed. Like I took
mhm,
a picture when we were on vacation on the beach, not when I'm folding laundry. That's just human nature. You
yeah,
record your happy moments. And when social media came to be, we started recording, we started sharing our happy moments. If there's 5,000 people on my Facebook friends list or 40,000 people on my Instagram list, and 1% of them had an amazing day, that's most of what I'm going to see in my feed.
mhm,
And I think you just need to keep that in mind to a certain extent, and kind of tiptoe into how much you might be very uncomfortable sharing yourself with the world. And maybe an objective brand is something that's more for you. But if you do want to tiptoe into sharing yourself with your community and your world, it can be very, very fulfilling. And you don't have to share it all. You can share that you had a hard moment. You can share that, this product that you're working on didn't go quite like you wanted. Share your process with people. That's
mhm,
interesting to people because they want to be a part of that. And I think that, a lesson that we're all learning is, if Gen Z is doing anything right, you guys, it's that I, I'll censor myself, but the BS, the stuff that put online that's not real is not of interest to the younger generation. And I think that a lot of us are catching on to that. Look at any space, who the most successful people, look at the Disney space. Some of the most successful people, most of the most successful people in the Disney space don't look great in every picture they post. They use their stories like a reality television show where they're just talking live to you and like sharing their life with you. And that's a shift that's happening. I remember, this is going to sound off subject. I remember watching the first American Idols. I was like
mhm,
coming home from college, I think it was, when I forget when it was. And my mom was like really into American Idol. And I remember her like watching this whole process. And I said, this is never going to work because we want to worship our rock stars. We don't want to see how they came to be. Like, we don't want to
mhm,
see this like climb to the top. We just want them to be infallible and like to worship them because that's how it used to be.
mhm.
And I was wrong. I was wrong. And that's how everything is right now.
Yeah.
We want to see that climb to the top. We want to see like the struggle. We want to see the day to day. We want to see real. And so while I think a lot of us say, oh, we only show our best selves, we filter ourselves, we reshape our bodies, we only show our best moments, all of the things that look like trends online, I think that's a red herring. I think the realness, like where we're really going is this like real, unfiltered day-to-day stuff. Like, if I follow somebody on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, I love seeing them just in their
Yeah.
moment to moment. I don't need them to be superhuman. And I think that's how the world has changed a lot. And so, I don't know that it's quite the balancing act. It's just sort of tiptoeing into what you're comfortable with. But I do think that where the world is going is more the unfiltered, more authentic people
Okay.
rather than this like posed, perfected sort of um, shaped thing that we choose to put into the world once we've shaped it the way we want to shape it.
Okay. And next, I want to ask, shift maybe a little bit, specific to your candles. Um, what can you kind of walk us through how you started with your your research and development of uh, of, of figuring out, from someone who you said you've never done this before, figuring out about different scents and kind of like I sort of picture like it's almost like a chemistry set where you're mixing and you're trying to identify how these should smell. Like, how did you get into, or how did you research? How did you develop? Did you spend a lot of times at the parks, like just kind of gathering smells, if you will, to be able to do this?
So the smells themselves are they dictate themselves. I've got a long list of additions that I need to make to the line. They're not hard to come up with. So if you're watching this and you're not in the Disney space, you probably think we're very weird right now. But if you are a Disney person, you know that like one of the big things about being in the parks is smells. Disney's really, really smart about this. They actually pump the smells into certain
Mhm.
attractions and locations and hotel lobbies and stuff because smell is a really powerful thing. It's very primal. It kind of bypasses all of the filters in the brain and gets right to the root, literally. Um, and so it tends to be a very powerful way to recall memories and bring us back to times in our lives. And anybody who's kind of crossed a street and passed somebody with a certain perfume and all of a sudden they're remembering
Mhm.
their great aunt knows what I'm talking about. Smell is very powerful. And so people who love Disney and tend to find comfort in this place, a lot of times we'll talk a lot about the smells of Disney, whether it's the water smell in Pirates of the Caribbean or the way the beach club lobby smells. And Disney's very deliberate about this. They put their scents into different areas. And sometimes it's just that there's cinnamon rolls baking and that's what the restaurant smells like. But the Disney is very purposeful about the scents. Um, Choose a job that have some natural skill out. I tend to have a really good nose, to say the very least. I'm deeply immersed in Disney and I know the smells a lot. And I do tend to be good at kind of taking 25 different scents and sniffing them and figuring out how they'll go together to make pirates or um, you know, the beach club lobby or whatever else. Um, you know, that being said, I think that there's a lot to be said for just how much you can teach yourself these days if you
Mhm.
want. I no, I didn't take like a candle class. I joined Facebook groups and I watched YouTube videos and I started like ordering samples from all of the shops that looked like they were popular. I was like, all right, these are the 10, 12 different retailers that are vendors that seem to be really, really good in their wax. Like I'm seeing their names over and over again in these Facebook groups where they're talking about where they buy the best wax from. And so I
Mhm.
ordered every single wax and I started testing them all and all the wicks and all the this and all. But it's all just stuff that you teach yourself, right? Like, whether I'm in a Facebook group or watching a YouTube video or reading up on something, if you fall in love with something and you want to give some time to it, you can teach it to yourself. Like there's a famous sort of writer influencer. I think her tagline is that she learned everything. She quit high school and everything that she's done since was with the Google search tool.
Mhm.
Um, and I wouldn't discount the power of that.
Yeah. So then go for, and this is kind of general for any entrepreneur, no matter what you're doing. Um, can you walk us through kind of the day-to-day schedule of obviously your schedule or what you have to do on a daily basis, but then I think we'll get an idea of just how much work goes into kind of the end product that people see that an entrepreneur offers.
Okay, so I, as a start, I man sort of 5 to 6 like very active social media area platforms.
Mhm.
So I have my personal Instagram, which is where I derive most of my contact with my larger community. I have the Candles Instagram. I have my personal Facebook. I have the Castle Run Facebook page. I have the Castle Run community Facebook group, and then I have a Pinterest. So, and across, there are certain people who only communicate with me through certain of those
Mhm.
channels. So that's in itself is sort of a daily maintenance task to make sure that I'm communicating with people, and that if somebody reaches out to me or writes to me with a touching story or something, that I'm taking the time to respond to them either real time or I tend to set aside very. So I run in the morning. So I usually wake up at about 5. My baseline run is 3 miles, and then on the weekends I'll go longer if I'm training for something. So I'll wake up at 5, I'll run, I'll shower, I'll get ready, I'll get my kids up, my kids ready, dressed, ready for school. I then will usually take an hour or so across social media platforms to try and make sure that I've responded to people, that I've dealt with customer inquiries. If somebody has a wholesale request or their candle arrived broken or something, that those people have been attended to right away. I then will pack orders for a couple of hours at least most mornings. I usually do it myself. God bless my family. If they're around, they'll help me sometimes, but it's usually just me. So I'll pack orders for a couple of hours. During the Christmas holiday, that usually will take about 12 hours of my day. This time of year, it takes a couple hours. And then I try at the beginning of the month to set out what I'm going to do, because it's very, very easy for what I just said to you to just blow up into being my whole day. And then you get away from like product development and sort of longer term goals, and you can kind of get rushed up in the day-to-day needs. And so I try to set aside an hour to 2 hours of time for product development and product planning. Another hour is set aside for like content planning. I'll do that each week. I'll set aside an hour for content planning. It's very day to day. It's not like I have a schedule to tell you. It's I wake up at around 5 a.m. and I'm usually go to bed at around 12:30.
Okay.
And it's very, very, other than like forcing myself to sit down and have dinner with my kids and like do things with them and stuff. Otherwise, I'm basically 24/7 either dealing with the Castle Run side of things, which is the social media side, or product development on core memory candles. And I also do a lot of photography. And so that kind of gets played in. So if it's a busy, during like sort of graduation season, for example, I did a lot of photo shoots with grads. It's a quieter side of my business, but I do that as well. And so during certain times of year, I make sure that I'm allowing myself time to do the photo shoots and also edit pictures. So it's all very cyclical. Like I said, I mean, during the Christmas season, I am barely sleeping, period. And it's all candles all the way. During other times of the year, I try to give more attention to the social media side of things, but it's a very long day, to say the least.
And that's what you said earlier, is you work harder at this, or you work harder and longer than maybe you did before. And for an entrepreneur, where do you find that balance of, here is what's work, here's what is my own time or family time or time with friends, or have you found it's best to sort of have separate times, or does that all kind of exist and mix together?
It all kind of coexists. I mean, and anybody who's like a workaholic going into an entrepreneurial, line of work is going to have the same issue where, nature abhors a vacuum, and that's sort of how my work ethic is. If I'm not doing something, I'm feeling guilty about that. And that's a personal issue that I need to deal with. It's a conversation for another day. But it does all kind of flow together. And I think the way that I've mostly found to make it work, especially during those insane times of year where it's just like my kitchen looks like a laboratory. I've got holiday season. I'm covering all the holiday stuff at Disney. I'm dealing with hundreds of orders a day. There's like wax everywhere. I'm like in the thick of it trying to type articles about stuff, and like there's a lot of photography stuff happening then. So it's, it's a crazy, crazy time. So especially in times like that, I just kind of try to weave it all together. Like, I will never regret working in front of my children. I've been very sort of open and honest and saying I did not leave my job for my children. I love my children. I want them to have great lives, but I think there's nothing wrong with them seeing a mother who works like a dog. I don't think that's a bad thing. That being said, I try to include them, whether like helping me like fold the boxes, or like I'm just including them in like, oh, which smell do you like more? These are the possible pumpkin scents for this season. What do you guys like? Just trying to make them feel included in the process, so they've got kind of like a leg in the game too. And they love that. They love like putting the warning labels on the candles, and sometimes that's just what it is. And you just have to be okay with that. Sometimes you're not going to like, sit around the kitchen table for an hour and a half and talk about the school day. Someday your time together is going to be sticking warning labels on candles. And that's when you're talking about the school day. And friends too. I mean, a lot of my work is Disney, so it kind of flows into outings with friends and being able to be together and share stuff together. So it definitely all flows together. It's definitely a dangerous area if you tend to be a workaholic and you're going into entrepreneurship. It used to be that I didn't enjoy my job and I was just checking boxes basically. I mean, I worked around the clock, don't get me wrong. I was billing 3,600 hours a year. It was obscene. But in my mind, when I was finished because I wanted to be finished. And now when I'm finished, I'm like, oh, I just finished packing 26 orders and making all these candles. So now it's 1:00 in the morning, but this is my only moment to start thinking about blank product line in the
Yeah.
pipeline that I've been trying to develop. And it's like, there's never a moment where there's not a possibility like that.
Yeah.
So I think what I've started to try to do is, like, for example, I'll pop into the parks I've been doing this a lot this week and sharing it openly, but the parks are so quiet this week that I've been like running to the parks a lot for 2 hours, like for like 1 or 2 hours with the kids after school. We'll run to Animal Kingdom and we'll ride safari, or we'll run to Hollywood Studios to ride Rock and Roller Coaster. And I'm just trying, and what I try to do is remind myself that while it doesn't feel that way on the surface, that time is valuable to me as well, as far as productivity, because it's clearing my mind. It's giving my mind room to ruminate on new ideas. I always say, like, I get the time back tenfold that I spend running, because the ideas that I get all my ideas when I'm running.
Yeah.
And so, obviously you feel better too, and you're more productive and clear-headed in that way. But just the sheer time that I spend running, I get back tenfold, just because it's when I get my ideas.
Yeah.
And so while it doesn't feel like, it feels like I'm setting aside an hour of non-work to run, but that's not the reality of it.
Yeah.
And so I try to remind myself that, like, these sort of like healthy, balanced type parts of life are contributing to my work, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you tell us some of the struggles and triumphs of being an entrepreneur? And because I think that's, again, as we talked about with social media, people see the celebratory side, or the more positive side of most things. They don't see kind of those struggles that go into it as well. So could you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah, of course. And I'll start with the triumphs and just emphasize the fact that the triumphs are generally one-on-one interactions. It's
Okay.
not that I hit 40,000 followers on Instagram. It's that this one person messaged me that the story I told last week resonated with them, and their life is different as a result. Or somebody got up the urge to, fight their anorexia or leave their abusive husband. Or, a lot of what I do is just sharing, having the strength to walk away from a life that's not working. And like I said, I happen to be in Disney World, but a lot of what I do is kind of meant to cross that bridge and not really be about Disney World so much as it's about just like being empowered to walk away from something that society says is right and writing your own script. And so my triumphs aren't, these big numbers or anything like that. My triumphs are seeing that what I'm doing is working, in that it's affecting other people and it's giving other people permission. And so I think that's just a life lesson for me and for anyone else, to focus not on the fact that how many zeros are after your follower number on Instagram, as like the meaningful interactions that you're having with real people from day to day. And if you focus on that, you could have 75 followers and you could run a business on it. Because if you've got 75 people who are, hell or high water for you, no matter what you say, and will stand up for you and have your back, like, you've got a great backing to start serving that community with a line of business. People think about having 100,000 followers. You don't need that, like, at all. You need a small group of hardcore people that love you and that you love back and that you want to do for, and that need something that you do. So my triumphs are in that space. My triumphs are also just like every time somebody buys a product, I'm like, wow, I made this thing and you want it, like, in your home. I created this thing and you gave me money because you wanted it. Like, that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
It's like the littlest thing. It's like when you flush the toilet and the water goes the wrong way or the right way. Like, it's one of those little things that you stop appreciating in life, right? Like, you created this thing out of nothing and someone gave you money because they wanted it. Like, how cool is that? Never lose sight of that. If you sell things, never lose sight of that. There's 100 other things they could have done with that money. That's a triumph. As far as the struggles, I think a big part of it is just that, like, there's supposed to be a struggle. Like a lot of what I've very much come to accept, and I think I always knew, is that it's not whether you're happy at the end of the day, it's whether you're fulfilled.
Mhm.
So I am always working hard. I am always struggling. I am struggling every day with that balance that we just talked about. It's so hard. I struggle with whether or not I'm a good enough mother because I spent, I spent the entire month of Christmas not sleeping and making products and shipping them out. Like, does that make me am I a good enough mom? Like, am I giving my friends enough time? Like, are my friends giving me enough time? Like, I had an argument with my husband. What am I going to do about that? I need groceries. Like, I need, sometimes you need more supplies than you have money coming in just because it's that time of year. Like going into the Christmas season, I need a lot of stuff, and that's kind of
Mhm.
scary. Um, I don't have a quick and easy, my triumphs I can sum up pretty well. My struggles, it's just real life. You're going to work hard, and like you're supposed to be struggling. The human body is supposed to face challenges.
Mhm.
People get depressed, and I'm going to make this oversimplified, and please don't take this out of context, but like a lot of depression comes from the fact that we no longer challenge ourselves. And if you don't feel like you're being challenged and that you're growing, it's a very bad thing. So if there's not struggle in your life, then you're probably going to have other problems down the line.
Mhm. The the next and thank you for that honest assessment of kind of what it is both day to day to be an entrepreneur, and then to share some of the triumphs, and also talk about the side that, as I said, people don't see. A lot of people don't see it when they're looking at buying a product for someone, or reading about their journeys and things, or I should say watching their journey every day. The 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 next thing that I want to talk about is you are a very experienced based person, as far as you're constantly, as you said, you're in the parks,
Mm-hmm.
taking pictures, talking about your experiences. You are taking nature walks, and uh, working with your photography on these different, in these different types of settings.
Mm-hmm.
The and what we're going through right now in this ongoing health crisis, um, naturally puts someone who is an experienced base person, and a lot of your brand has been experience based, that puts someone like that in precarious situations. So I want to ask how the pandemic, and obviously, the Disney parks were closed for about 10 weeks. But then even when they have reopened, um, how does it feel to go back, and you're going back either on at least a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
and you are putting yourself in a situation, um, that a lot of other people may not want to put themselves in, as far as being around in a crowded area and things like that. Um, how has this current situation impacted what you do, um, for your brand and for your businesses?
So for starters, it's a big question and it's so timely. So for starters, you know, I live my life within my own comfort range
Mhm.
and my own risk tolerance range. Having, you know, it's a tough time to talk about. Yeah, I live in Florida, obviously. I will say that being here is a lot different from what's being portrayed, to say the very, very least. But that being said, I kind of live my life within my own comfort range. And from the day that the Disney parks opened, not surprisingly, if you know how Disney does things, I have felt, and you'll hear this echoed, amongst most people that live here, I have felt at least as safe, if not safer here than I have at the grocery store
Mhm.
there at Disney. We I try to be up on the guidance and make good decisions for myself and my children. I'm vaccinated. We wear masks indoors. We, try to keep our distance and be smart and, use hand sanitizer. And we just try to make good decisions for ourselves. And that's the life that I live.
Mhm.
And I happen to be involved in social media. And so a lot of that gets portrayed, and sometimes you get happy messages, sometimes you get nasty messages. You just kind of have to live your life comfortably and do what you do. I am very, very clear that everybody makes their own decisions,
Mhm.
whether you want to be here or you don't want to be here. I get tons of questions from people asking me about how safe I feel should they cancel their trip, and I always kind of sit on those messages like, oh, don't ask me that question. And when I do write back, it's just like, listen, I'm living what I feel comfortable with.
Mhm.
I feel at least as safe in the Magic Kingdom as I do in Publix, to say the very least. We're living what we're comfortable with, but I can't speak for you and your family. You need to, I can tell you that I'm very comfortable being here. I
Mhm.
can't speak for you. And so I just try to do what I'm comfortable with, be very honest about that, not put that on other people, not project that onto other people, not even answer other people's questions with my own judgment, because it's not a good time for that. And I just try to kind of keep in mind that, you know, it's those people that kind of need this the most right now. It's
Mhm.
the people who love Walt Disney World, but just don't feel quite comfortable yet being
Mhm.
here, that are gravitating so much toward watching me walk through Magic Kingdom or having a spontaneous evening. Last night, I took my kids to Epcot and we just rode Test Track, and they had like one thing from Food and Wine, and we left. We were there at the park for an hour. And it's those little moments that I can share that are really most serving the people who, for one reason or not, can't be here or don't feel
Mhm.
comfortable being here. The candles are the same thing. My two lines of work are very much in line with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
It's the people who love this place and yearn for it and are having a lot of times a really emotionally difficult time just because of the state of the world right now and want this comfort so much. Those are the people that I'm serving. So I can't speak for those people. I can't make decisions for those people, but I do live within my own comfort zone openly and recognize that it's probably the people that disagree with me the most that need this the most right
Mhm.
now. And everybody can have their own opinion right now. It's a tough time in the world as far as that kind of thing is concerned. But yeah, I mean, I think that just because of the nature of what the world is like right now, we need our communities more than ever. We
Mhm.
need our happy places and our safe spaces more than ever. And if you're in a position to provide that for people, then the current world situation is, ripe with possibilities for you to be able to serve your communities in
Yeah.
ways that you might not have realized before.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm going to ask this correctly, but you mentioned you feel as though you going and kind of highlighting your journey in the parks, outside of the parks, different things really helps the community, and maybe helps people who want to go but aren't comfortable going or can't go for some other reason. Do you ever kind of, where's the balance of, do you ever feel like you're doing all of this and you're going to the parks and you're showcasing this because that is your authentic, trying to just be authentic and show your life? um are there times where you feel like maybe you don't feel like doing that, but you need to because you feel like someone else might need to see it, or someone else might need to, kind of take that journey with you?
Yeah, it's a really like interesting balance to, it's, a lower version of it is living here. Like, how much does living here take away from the magic of the parks because it becomes a normal part of your life, not this like special vacation experience? And, you know, Disney's always changing things. Like, how much are we doing trying this new snack because we really want it versus that it's all over Instagram?
Hmm.
And I think that, um, you do kind of have to watch your balance, even if you're talking about something as happy and wonderful as Disney World. Like, sometimes you're tired and you don't feel like going. Um, I think that, you know, if I'm in a headspace to share something in a good light, I'm not saying like talk about a food that I like and say that I'm not saying lie about the experience. I'm just saying, like, if I'm not in a good headspace to share an experience, then I'm not
Hmm.
doing anyone any favors.
Yeah.
And in any
Okay.
space you're in, I mean, Disney's obviously tenfold, but any space that you're in, there's a lot of people covering it. And like, if you're not in a good headspace to cover this new thing, then like there's somebody else in the space that'll cover that thing. You do your thing that day. That's okay. Like I'm famous for like, you know, I think I jokingly posted an Instagram picture once, like TTA had just opened, the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, if you're not a Disney person, is this very nostalgic thing in the Magic Kingdom where you kind of ride around quietly and have this experience. And it was closed for months. So it never reopened when the parks reopened. And so this past summer, a few months ago, it finally reopened. And like everyone is flocking to Magic Kingdom to like live stream their TTA for their audience. And like I just wasn't feeling it that day. Like I didn't have the energy for Magic Kingdom. And I think I was like at Epcot and I had a new macro lens on my camera and I was like taking pictures of the bees
Yeah.
on the flowers. And I remember sharing it out on Instagram and just saying like everybody is at TTA and I'm just here at Epcot taking pictures of bees.
Yeah.
And my audience loved that because it was me. You know, it was just this real moment of like they had their TTA content and they got different stuff from me that day because that's the headspace that I was in. And sometimes you have to buck up. Like if you're tired and it's the first Christmas party and you want to cover it and get the information, then you just go do it.
Yeah.
Sounds funny to complain about that kind of thing, but sometimes your kids need you. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes it's been a long day and running around this thing and trying to cover it isn't the first thing you want to be doing or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, but just know that no matter how much you love something, it's okay that it gets old sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep it fresh, you probably want to just keep being authentic with your audience and only experiencing it to the extent that you want to experience it.
Yeah. With your ventures, have you, or I guess maybe what advice would you give people when does something grow large enough that you may require help outside of, like in your case, outside of your family or people who are willing to help? For any kind of beginning entrepreneur, do you think that there is an easily recognizable point where they need to hire someone to help with their product development, help with the everyday business?
That's the $1 million question. And if there was an appendix on that plan that you were talking about earlier that talks about this, I would also like for that to be delivered to my home. It's such a hard question. And it's somebody who's really, really far along on this journey. It's the kind of thing they might be like, oh, just get help, like get help when you need it. I always joke. There's some speakers that I've heard speak, and they have famously said, well, maybe not famously, I just remembered it because it spoke to me. Some very wealthy new entrepreneurs, right? And they kind of come into the scene and they give these keynote speeches. And one of the lines that I always hear these people saying is, never do something yourself that you can delegate. Because you should never spend time doing things that aren't unique to your skill set. Like if you could pay somebody else to do it, that's what you should be doing. Well, that's lovely if you're rich and starting a new company. But most of us aren't in that situation. And so there's going to be a period of time where you could definitely justify getting some help, but you can't really justify dipping that much into your profits yet to hire a person. And, you know, so there's this like scary phase where it's like, it's more work than you can handle, but you can't quite handle paychecks yet.
Yeah.
And then there's a scary aspect of that too. There's a part of it where it's like, well, I don't know if I want to be doing this for the rest of my life. Right now I can walk away from it, but if all of a sudden I've got people depending on me for a salary, then I am married to this. So that aspect of it is a little scary too. To that, I would say those people are getting job experience, and I and everyone else needs to just come to terms with the fact that you can hire a person and not know that you're going to employ them for 90 years. I'm like fidgeting in my chair because this is like such a question. But yeah, I mean, I think that like to a certain extent in the beginning, it's going to be you in the thick of it with your family. Sometimes like my mom is here with my mom's boyfriend, who I love to death. He's wonderful. And my children and my husband, and we're around the clock and we're just cranking candles. And that's just what we're doing because that's what life is right now. You know, there are certain times a year, I think certainly this time of year, I will probably think about, all right, do I want to bring in temporary help? for the
Mhm.
holiday season to kind of get me through that and allow the holiday season to be something where I'm still being creative and not doing nothing but not sleeping and pouring wax.
Yeah.
So I don't have an easy answer to your question. It's kind of a situation that I'm
Yeah.
living large right now and kind of figuring out for myself. What I will say is from the thick of it, from where I'm sitting right now, know that all of the easy answers that people who start this journey with full bank accounts, I don't mean full bank, I mean people who start this journey because they're wealthy from something
Mhm.
else are living a very different situation and don't feel like you're a failure if you can't delegate your easy tasks to begin
Yeah.
with. You know, I work around the clock, and sometimes I'm working around the clock on things that have nothing to do with development. I'm just cranking out product and shipping it out as fast as I can. And then I'll come up for air because like that season passes or that moment passes or that sale passes, and I'll come up for air and I'm like, oh God, I'm going to get a thermal printer because I can't deal with printing labels anymore. I'm going to do all of the things along the way that kind of streamline your process for yourself. Come up for air and invest in yourself. Come up for air and feed into your own business, and then just know that like that's sort of the beginning of the journey. And
Mhm.
you know, it's okay that you can't delegate stuff out. It's okay that you can't afford help. You shouldn't have staff when you first start. And just kind of bring it in as it feels safe. You know, initially it might be a family affair. You might have like a friend across the street who is just willing to kind of come over and help you do stuff and
Yeah.
have you'll buy the pizza later in the day. That's okay in the beginning. And like as it starts to feel like you need people and you're in a position to commit to paying them, that you bring slowly, whether it's like a temp staff during the holidays or like one person, like one, high school kid, that you're going to, pay to come and help for 5 hours a week.
Yeah.
Um, that might, and seeing, and a lot of the challenge, right, isn't just the financial aspect of it. It's the fact that it's your baby and, I'm very micromanagey about things. It's something that is a challenge for me because I'm so type A about every single thing. And I'm so immersed in the process because I've created every aspect of these. So whether
Mhm.
it's the design of the label or how they stick on or what's a specific lid I use or how I how I attach the wick to the tin, it's all a process that I've formulated over a very long period of time. And so it's hard to think about entrusting other people with aspects of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, when my kids come in, I'm like, oh, how can my kids help? They want to be involved. Oh, they can fold the candle boxes. They can stick warning labels on the bottom. My mom loves to help, but she doesn't want to do X, Y, and Z, but she's really good at shipping. So she's my shipping department sometimes when she's in town during
Yeah.
Christmas. And you kind of, and it's the same thing with bringing in help. Like, you're probably going to be bringing in like a kid who can help you for a few hours a week. And it's going to be kind of scary at first to see that person kind of in your process that you're used to being
Mhm.
able to oversee every aspect of. But as that person gets good at this, then you can kind of add that. I have people that come in and help me like during the busiest seasons. And it's always kind of a joy for me to kind of see that like at first they were having trouble doing these very basic things. And then at the end of the season, they're like mastered how to like produce shipping labels or something.
Yeah.
Um, so that's it grows very naturally. And I think that if we compare ourselves to people that come into this who are already very comfortable in a position to bring in staff right away, we need to know that we're not failures for having to go about things differently.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really, really like about that response is it is just this, it also is this unknown. There's so much of it that's unknown. Which brings me to my next question. And I have about two or three more, or about three more to um sort of wind down so I don't take up more of your time. But that constant path of turns and dips and valleys and hills and everything that comes with being an entrepreneur, how do you deal with that? I mean, you've mentioned several times, you make candles now. It doesn't mean you have to be making candles later in life. Where, as an entrepreneur, how are you looking for and sort of selecting potential new areas that you could go and you could create either product or experiences or different things? And how do you select, which ones maybe you want to focus on while you're doing what you're doing right now as well.
So that's a very organic process as well. A lot of times, once you kind of get started with a given product, your customer base is going to answer those questions for you.
Okay.
So, for example, when I initially launched the candle line, I had a black vessel instead of the white that you see behind me now, but I had these beautiful matte black glass vessels, and that was all that I sold. I just, and I always say that, start with a product, master that product, and expand from there. Don't start with 15 products that are all sub whatever. Sell one thing and do it right, and then grow as you can.
Okay.
So, I had these gorgeous black vessels. Well, the black vessels were very hard to source, but I was always able to get them. All of a sudden, the pandemic starts. I have the largest call for product I've ever had for all the reasons that I've talked about. My customer base was canceling trips. They were so sad. They were missing this place. The parks were closed. I had more orders coming in and more inquiries than I'd ever had in my life. All of a sudden, I can't get the vessels because the international shipping situation. So I need something. So I'm starting to look what black vessel is the best that's closest. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do a second best copy of what I used to sell. We'll do something different. So that was where I have a line of tins, like travel tins. Now they're right over here. I have a line of travel tins that I created when I couldn't get the black vessels initially because people needed the product and I needed to find a way to deliver it to them that didn't feel subpar. And so that was where the tin line came from.
Okay.
I started getting messages from all of these teachers and people in apartments that couldn't have flames writing to me and saying, I love your product. It brings me to such a happy place and, brings back so many memories. I would love to have it, for example, in my classroom, but I can't have a candle in my classroom. Have you ever thought about doing wax melts or oils? Well, now I'm thinking about it because I know you guys need it. So I now have a line of wax melts and I have a line of fragrance oils. When the mask stuff started and people had funky masks, whenever I started doing a fabric refresher spray that people could spray, you can spray it on your pillow or in your car. You can also spray it on your mask. So I've just sort of been trying to listen to what my customer base wants to some extent in developing products that they want. And then, on the other end of it, there's all of these things that I've thought of that I want to do. And at any given moment, like I've said, there's 4 different product lines, completely new product lines that I'm working on right now. I don't know which ones will launch. I kind of have a sense at this point, which ones will launch first, but you kind of come up for air and it's like, I'm really motivated to do blank today. And you kind of run with it. And maybe it comes to fruition. Maybe you set it aside for the next time that you come up for air. But again, it's this sense of being almost incapacitated by ideas. And that's the trick. That's the thing that you need to kind of get yourself past, because there's all these different things that I want to do. And if I spend my time thinking about that, I'll never focus on just one of them.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to pick a thing and run with it. Listen to your customers. Obviously, I was, like I was just saying, there, things have sort of come to be very organically based on demand. And that continues to be the case. And then to the extent that I have other ideas, I just, you just come up for air and you spin those wheels in the creative process and planning. And I will, for example, a lot of times at the beginning of the month, I'll sit down and I have my monthly planner, and the very first page of it, I will write down like 4 to 5 long-term goals for that month.
Okay.
Like I need to have my logo finished by the end of this month. I want to have blank line of products launched. I want to have this scent finalized, this wholesale order that's been in the works, for the last 2 months that we've been sort of like tinkering back and forth. I want that to be finalized and under contract or not. And then the next thing. So it's like this list of sort of this list of tangible deliverables that I like to have for myself for the end of the month. And then I kind of plan my weeks accordingly so that when I do have those quiet moments, it's never a quiet moment, but when I do have those moments where like I've packed as many orders as I'm going to do today, my kids are both happy and my dog is fed and walked, my kitchen floor is clean, and I'm like, all right, I have a moment. And then I can look at that list. And I always have that long-term list at my fingertips, because a lot of times in those moments, you don't quite know what to do with yourself. And I sometimes will just look at that list and say like, all right, I'm going to pick this one thing. And that's what I'm going to run with for tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so for anybody wanting to get into an entrepreneurial venture, what advice would you give them, having been in this for a number of years now? What advice would you give them on kind of best ways to start, And then also touch on the how important or what important transferable skills are needed for someone to go into business for themselves.
So transferable skills are pretty universal, and there's not much that's not a transferable skill, right? It goes right back to what I was talking about before. Your past is not a negative. It's, I might have been a lawyer for longer than I wanted to be a lawyer, but the skill set that I took out of that, the skill set that I took out of law school, the skill set that I took out of college, the skill set that I took out of doing these different things that are not what I'm doing right now, they're all being used.
Hmm.
I am who I am because of what I did yesterday and the day before
Hmm.
and the day before. And so all of that is contributing to how I'm functioning in my productivity today. And so skills just transfer, and you are who you are. I mean, when I decorate my house, I tend to gravitate toward the same colors. So I don't have to think too much about coordinating, because what I'm drawn to is what I'm drawn to. And so
Hmm.
if I just kind of give myself to that, my whole house is going to match. Your life is kind of the same way. Like, I was drawn to certain aspects of law, and those were the things that I loved. I loved the academic side of law. I loved the sort of community aspect of law, and I loved all those aspects of it. There were other aspects of it that didn't work for me in the long term that outweighed the good stuff,
Hmm.
but I can still kind of take what I learned about what I liked in that and carry it into the next thing. Like, that's how I talk about the candles. It's photography, it's product design, it's graphic design, it's writing, it's all of these things that I'm interested in, and they all sort of come together in this one thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then finally, how do you measure success? And that's not just your business venture, bottom line profits, things like that. As an entrepreneur, how do you measure being successful at what you are doing as a taking kind of a whole perspective?
I don't know that you ever get there. It's such a dangerous question to ask these days because things are so quantifiable and numbers don't end. So it used to be that if you made enough money to support your family, you were successful. And now it's like, well, my company has 40,000 Instagram followers. Why don't we have 100?
Hmm.
It's a silly way of saying it, but I think it's so quantifiable these days and so tangible. And we're all such workaholics that um, it's almost impossible to say, oh, I'm successful. What I would focus on instead is, do I feel fulfilled at the end of the day? Do I feel challenged at the end of the day? Do I have regrets about the decisions that I made today on a macro level? Are my kids happy and healthy? Is my husband happy? Do I feel like I am, if I go to bed at the end of the day and I feel like my skill set is being used as best I can to serve my community, that's what works for me.
Okay.
And that my kids are happy and that my family's, all those things that you're supposed to say and that are so true. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think we think about like the beginning of the journey and then this like point of success where you check a box, and like that's never going to happen.
Okay.
Like, there's
Yeah.
always places to grow into. There's always more. You're never, especially if it's your baby and it's your business, you're never going to get to the point where it's like, yep, my product line is complete and I have made enough money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's always, it's not so much about the money. It's that, you have ideas. There's 20,000 things that you want to do. And like, there's only so many that you can, so if you frame success in that way, I think you're never going to get there, and you're just going to spend your whole life chasing this thing. And I would think more about just trying to assess at the end of each day, assess at the end of each week, assess at the end of each year. Did I use my time well? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel challenged? Are there things that are lacking? And it's just kind of that real-time growth
Hmm.
that I would focus on, rather than like this malleable thing called success that's not really touchable.
Okay. Well, and Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time. You're always generous enough to share your insights on various topics. And I know the students and listeners will really, really appreciate your insights on this, because as I said, this is a growing trend that I think more and more people will at least attempt to see if it's for them or not, being working for themselves and being an entrepreneur. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Anyone who wants to contact you or follow you for any reason, how can they do that?
So you can reach out to me via email at any time. It's lisa@thecastlerun.com. You'll also find a contact page on thecastlerun.com, which is my website that I was talking about. That'll also go to that same email. So you can always reach out to me that way if you need anything at all. The candle shop is corememorycandles.com. And there's also a shop tab on that Castle Run page that'll take you there. You can also find me on Instagram at the Castle Runner. I'm very active there and very responsive to DMs and comments. And then on Facebook too. I'm just under my personal name, Lisa DiNoto Glassner. And then my page, The Castle Run, and my group, The Castle Run Community. I'm equally active and responsive in all of them. So whatever forum whatever path you choose to take, I'll be there.
Okay. All right. And again, thank you very, very much. This was a great time and great information. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Lisa.
Always fun. Thanks, Cody.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.